Hey book lovers, Lori here. I'm here today to do another BookMas video. So I think I'm on day 19 of BookMas, so we're pretty far into it at this point. This is the video that I always contemplate not making, but I do want to talk through my least favorite reads of the year. And I'll just preface this by saying this is just my opinion. Take my opinion for what it's worth. If these books still sound interesting to you, please go check them out. I'm sure you might like them better than I did. But these are just my opinions. As always, I say, do what my opinion what you will, but I'm just going to give you my opinion. The first thing I want to chat through, though, is a couple of the DNFs I did this year. I really don't DNF super often. I have done it a couple of times this year, and I want to just talk through those books and like why I decided to DNF them, why I wasn't interested enough in them. Yeah, so we're going to start there. So I wound up DNFing, let's see, I think it was, yeah, it's like 4 books this year, which for me is a lot. I mean, because I barely ever DNF. I normally like just get to the end of the book and kind of call it done. Some booktubers I follow do count their DNFs in their Goodreads total for the year. I don't, just because I didn't finish it. But the first book we are going to chat about in this video is The Library of the Unwritten, which is actually a recent read, but here's a photo. I started to read this during like the Halloween season, and I had just read a book or was about to read a book. I just read The Library, the other library book that was on my TBR by Genevieve Cogman, The Invisible Library. This one, I just really struggled with the writing style. I found it to be super dense, and I found it hard to connect with. And it wasn't an easy plot to follow, I found, and that was really the reason I wound up DNFing it. I had read a book either previously or I was going to read another book, and both just were not connecting with me. I have really been trying this year to read a few more adults, and the couple of adult books I did choose this year just weren't my favorite, so I'm going to try to reevaluate what books I choose to read in the future. But I've said this before, I'm not the biggest fan of like war books and like battle books. And again, it had elements of that, so maybe that's why I didn't really like it. But I wound up DNFing it, and I don't plan on picking it up again, to be very honest. The next book I'm going to chat about is Rebel Girls, which is an arc that I picked up from the last time I went to BEA. I picked this one up. Here's a photo. This was a book that was about a younger sister, and her older sister went away to Bible camp, and there was a rumor going around that she had an abortion, and her younger sister was kind of trying to protect her in a sense. And it sounded very, very juvenile, and like also like I just didn't care about the characters. They were trying to say like it doesn't matter if you have an abortion, like that was the whole point of the book, but just didn't feel connected to keep reading. And I really honestly like it wasn't it I didn't connect to the writing style, and I didn't feel super connected to the characters. And it just didn't capture me. So that's why I wound up DNFing this one. But I do have a couple of other books that deal with abortion and teen pregnancy on my TBR, and this one, the writing style, I really struggled with, and that's why I wound up DNFing. My angle looks a little bit different. I just had to do something, so the angle might look a little bit different. But the next book I'm going to chat about that I wound up DNFing was The King's Questioner. This was more of a time frame DNF because I had to return to the library, and I just didn't think I was going to read it in enough time, and it wasn't grabbing me to read it super fast. So I wound up putting it down, and then I just never wound up picking it up again because I don't think my library owns a copy, so I'd have to request it. And honestly, I just sort of forgot about it, to be very honest. But I remember at the time, I didn't think it was a fast enough paced read for me to read it like continually. And that's why I wound up DNFing it. But I might pick it up again in the future. It sounded interesting. I just felt like it wasn't a fast-paced enough read for me to read so quickly as I needed to return it to the library. And then the last book that I DNF'd was actually an audiobook, and it was a historical fiction Regency romance called One Night of Passion. Here's a photo. I have been hunting for books that had a Regency romance plot that dealt with pregnancy as well. This is the one that was really pitched as that. But after that, it was like split into two time periods, and then there was the seafaring element, and I honestly did not care enough to keep reading. I do still have the audiobook, so it's possible I might read it physically again at some point and just kind of be done with it, but I really just did not care enough to see what happened to the characters. So, and for Regency romances, I really do need to care about the characters for me to like continue reading. And I've had some pretty good luck with the other ones that I read, but this one definitely was not a success for me. So at the time of this filming, I did wind up reading 201 books so far. The rest of the books on my TBR, I don't anticipate having any major issues with, so I don't imagine any of those would make this list, but if I feel like I really need to discuss it, I will chat through it in my December wrap-up, which is probably going to be 2 parts, and I'll kind of give you guys my thoughts if I thought any more books should be on this list, but there are 15 books I am going to chat about, so let's dive into the first one, which is The Invisible Library by Genevieve Cogman. Overall, I have been really struggling with adult reads, and I really made it a goal for myself in 2020 to read more diversely and try to pick up genres that I didn't necessarily pick up in the past. Adult fantasy is one of those genres that I'm still struggling to find my niche. I read a couple of adult books this year, and none really captured me other than The Queen's Poisoner, which I really liked. But this book, I just, again, sort of like The Library of the Unwritten, it just had some elements that didn't feel super, like, I did finish this one, though. I did enjoy it enough to keep reading it. But I don't think I'll pick up book 2, just because I feel like I just didn't connect to the characters, and I didn't really connect to the writing style. I only gave it 3 stars. But again, it's like a library-themed novel, and I thought I would, like, love that. This world building just did not capture my attention, unfortunately. The next book I'm going to chat about is another Comic-Con read. I have a couple actually on this list from this convention that I just didn't love, and this was Girls Will Save the World in this one. Again, the premise of this one sounded really cool, but it basically followed this trio of girls, and they wound up going to basically a zombie convention, and then the zombies wound up, there was like a real zombie outbreak in the convention hall. And I just didn't feel really connected to the characters. It was a really long read too. Like, it was like over close to 400 pages. And I remember just being really, really bored and not super invested in the characters or the storyline. Had a lot of diversity. Like, I like that. The characters were a little bit flat to me. And I felt like for such a long book, I really had to care about the characters to get there. So yeah, that's why I didn't want to liking this one as much. But I will definitely check out her future books. Like, I think the concept was cool. I just think it wasn't as executed as well as it could have been. The next book I'm going to chat about is Shadow Frost by Coco Ma. Here's a pretty photo. This cover is stunning, by the way. Really early in the year, so I'm trying to remember why I didn't enjoy it as much, but I struggled a little bit with the pacing and the world building. I like the characters. I thought the twists at the end were a little bit too predictable for my liking, and I didn't love the characters as much as I wanted to, so I didn't feel like connected in their journeys. And the pacing I struggled with, and when I have a book that I really struggle with the pacing and I'm not the biggest fan of the characters, I tend to struggle a lot with the read, and that's what happened with this book. But I am willing to give book 2 a shot, probably as like a borrow for sure, but it's not all dead yet. I just didn't really like this one as much as I was expecting to. The next book I'm going to chat about is one that it wasn't my favorite, but again, sort of with Shadow Frost, I would consider checking out book 2, and that's Diamond City. One thing I did like about this book was the world building. I thought it was an interesting situation. I thought it had like a fun element of like thieves and stuff. I love the author's background and how she used her life elements as like being homeless and how that was really catered into her storytelling. But again, I really just struggled to feel connected to the characters, and the plot wasn't super compelling. I felt like it needed a little bit more fast-pacedness to really capture my attention. But I did finish it, and I will consider reading book 2, probably as a borrow in the future. The next book I am going to talk about is The Midnight Hour. It is written by 2 authors. I think it's Benjamin something and then Laura Trinder, but here's the cover. It's written by Benjamin Reed. I have had such good luck with middle grade books this year. This is one that I really struggled with. I read it right after I read Hollow Dolls, and I was expecting a fast-paced adventure story. Not what I got. It was a really confusing read. Like, I felt like the world wasn't developed, and maybe it was because it was two authors writing the same story, and they didn't have two point of view characters, which I sometimes struggled a little bit with. I read a book last year, and I had very, very similar. There was like two authors, and they were only writing one character. It tended to mix up the world a little bit, but I just really did not care for the world or the characters. Sounded like I would, but I didn't. I only wound up giving this one 2 stars for review. The next book I'm going to chat through is Lobzinna. Here's the cover. This is a book that I'm a little bit angry. I'm upset that I didn't enjoy it as much because I thought it dealt with some really interesting topics, like dealing with immigration issues and getting deported. And then there was this interesting supernatural element. But the pacing in this book I so struggled with. And I think that was why I really didn't like it. I was on a blog tour for this and I really struggled to finish it. But I felt like the story needed a review and I read it. I will maybe check out book 2. Maybe I'll like listen to book 1 and maybe that will increase the pacing and maybe I'll like it a little bit better. But I remember feeling a little bit rushed when I was reading this one and I felt like I was in a rush to finish it. So maybe that's why I didn't like it as much. But I like the non-supernatural elements of this book a little bit more than the supernatural elements, which was interesting. So I will definitely try to keep reading. I'm just not sure how successful I will be in future books. I liked it. I didn't love it. And that's why it's on this list. The next book on this list is definitely a disappointment, and that's Meet Me at Midnight by Jessica Pennington. I was so looking forward to this book, like so looking forward to it. And I loved her 2 previous books. This book, honestly, was just boring. I didn't feel connected to the characters. The plot sounded fun. These two characters, they tend to like prank each other all year, all summer, and then something goes wrong with one of their pranks, and then it kind of sends them away. But they just like prank each other. So this was supposed to be love to hate. The story just did not capture me. So unfortunately, I only gave up this like at the most 3 stars. It was probably like a 2-star read for me. I just really struggled to feel connected to the characters, and the story just wasn't interesting, unfortunately. But I'm still gonna read her books in the future. This one was not my favorite by far. The next book that I want to put on this list was Havenfall by Sarah Holland. This is the 3rd Sarah Holland book that I read, and I loved Everless. Struggled a little bit more with Evermore. This one I really struggled with, and I think it was more to do with the length of the book. Like, I thought it was really cool, the concept of like this girl who winds up going to this place, and this inn she winds up going to is basically a pathway between worlds, like it connects different worlds together. But the world was so big, and I just felt like it couldn't fit in this book, and then it was really fastly paced, so I didn't have enough time to feel connected to the characters. Again, like Shadow Frost, like Lobzinna, I will probably wind up giving book 2 a shot just to see if I like like when they develop the world a little bit. First books are always a little bit tough. I always say that in every single review that I do. First books are a little bit tough to feel like the development of the world. But again, this is one that sort of disappointed me, but I'm willing to give it another chance when I read book 2, hopefully in 2021. The next book I'm going to chat about is another slightly disappointing one for me, and that's Leah on the Offbeat by Becky Albertalli. I am going to preface this review by saying I am a straight, cisgendered woman, so take my opinion with what it is. I liked Leah. I actually love Leah in Simon and the other side books in the series. I loved Catherine Langford, how she portrayed her in the movie. I really did not like her in this book. And it was more her character because you were in her head. And she made some really bad choices in this book that I really struggled with. The relationship she wound up being in towards the end wasn't my favorite. It wasn't the relationship I would have chose for Leah. And I really struggled with it. But I think I really struggled with how she was as a character. Not even how Becky wrote the book. I just struggled with her. And maybe that's a me thing, so you might like this and say, oh, Leah's great. I just didn't like Leah as a character in this book, but I like the Simon verse, and I really like that. I actually really want to read Creekwood eventually. My library has it. I might pick it up in 2021, next time I go back to the library. It just didn't capture me, and I really felt like I didn't like Leah as a character in this book, which was disappointing. So that's why that book wound up being on this list. Has nothing to do with Becky's writing. I love Becky's writing. I love the world building. I just really struggled with Leah as a character and the choices that Leah made in the book. So that's my 2 cents. Take it for what it's worth. The next book is another first book in the series that I sort of struggled with, and that is Scavenged the Stars by Tara Sim. Here's a pretty photo. This is a Count of Monte Cristo retelling, and I am not super familiar with that story. So for me, that part was all new, and I felt like I missed a little bit because I was unaware of the story. But I just didn't feel connected to the characters, and the book was paced really, really weird, and it was a really, really short read, and it just wasn't grabbing me. I'm going to try to check out book 2 when it comes out, try to get better with my sequels in 2021. But again, this is another book that just didn't grab me, and it was not a fast-paced read that really captured my attention. And I will be honest, before quarantine hit in, I was really just craving some faster-paced reads, and a lot of these that wound up on this list was not doing that with me, which is why they dragged a little bit for me. And that was mostly due to the pacing and the writing style for most of these in general, and that's why Scavenged the Stars fell onto this list as well. This was the year that I did wind up finding a lot of historical fiction books, both adult and YA, that I really liked, but I really struggled with the Enigma Game by Elizabeth Wen, and that's why this book's on the list. I will preface this by saying I read these books out of order, and I didn't make the connection until like midway through when my friend gifted me one of the books that I should have read them in order. But because I didn't feel really connected to the characters, the story didn't like land really well. And it was a spycraft novel, but there was a lot of battle stuff. And I've said this before, I am not the biggest fan of battle. I tend to get lost in the details. And one whole point of view was battle-based. And I like the spycraft elements, but again, was not super invested in that story either. However, I am going to give her another shot. I have The Pearl Thief on my that someone got me for Christmas, so I'll probably wind up reading that in 2021. But again, I feel like reading these books out of order did hinder my enjoyment just a little. So yeah, that's my thoughts about that. We are on the final 2 books to make my disappointing reads of the year list, and the next one is The Mall by Megan McCaffrey. Here's a pretty photo. The author has a very like impressive backlist. This is the first one that I picked up, and I liked it. I thought it was okay. I was expecting a lot more from it, and I didn't feel connected to the characters. I sort of was predictable where it was going to wind up. The romance didn't grab me at all, and I say this a lot of times in contemporaries. If your romance doesn't grab me from page 1, it just didn't, and it wasn't a book that captured my attention. So that's why it's on this list. And I just felt like it was okay. I gave it like 3 stars. It was fine, but it wasn't anything to write home about. And again, it was a book that was set in the 90s, like the early 90s, like 91, 92. I was like 3 at that point. So the references they were making were not references I knew as growing up in the 90s, because I was like 90, 99, 95 to that like 97. That's when I was like growing up. So the references really didn't land with me either. So maybe that's why I was like not engaged at all. But it was enjoyable. Just the elements didn't really click together to make a solid contemporary that I really would have liked. The last book I'm going to chat about in this video is How to Love by Katie Cotugno. At this point, this is my 3rd Katie Cotugno book, and I liked her most recent one, You Say It First, like the best. And I know people have said her backlist is just a little bit stronger. I really struggled with this one, and it dealt with teenage pregnancy, which I thought was interesting. I like that, but the relationship in this book was so unhealthy, because it's basically set in before, like up until when she gets pregnant, and then it's set after when he comes back to town, like after the baby's born, like a year later. And I really struggled. And I know there was, he had addictions, and he was, he had a lot of issues going on. But their relationship was so incredibly unhealthy that for me to like get buy-in for the second half of the book, I really struggled with it. I have a really hard time liking, possessive men. Like, that's just a trope I don't like. Like, I was never a fan of Twilight, those books. Like, I didn't think Edward should be with Bella. So whenever I see a relationship super similar, I immediately get turned off, and I didn't feel like she did a good enough job to, like, kind of redeem him in the end. I didn't know if he could be redeemed. But again, it was okay. It wasn't my favorite. That's why it's wound up on this list. Again, I apologize if some of these books are your absolute favorites. I didn't hate any of them. They weren't, like, horrible. They just had some pacing, character, or structure issues. But let me know in the comments what are some of your most disappointing reads of the year, and I will talk to you for my next BookMas video. Bye, guys. Sorry, guys. You'll notice that there's no pictures in this video because I was having a lot of problems with my iMovie, so I apologize for that. Hopefully I can have it fixed for the next video. I'll probably wind up trying to restart YouTube and stuff like that, but that is why there was no pictures in here. I apologize. But I hope you guys liked the video anyway. Bye, guys.